Welcome back. In Afghanistan, the government says it has released 100 Taliban prisoners as part of its pledge to release 2,000 inmates in response to the group's call for a 3-day Eid ceasefire. National Security Council spokesman Javed Faisal said the release process will continue with 100 prisoners each day until the 2,000 count is reached. He said the ceasefire is holding and there have been no reports of any violations so far. Faisal said the government hopes this will lead to a lasting peace that the people of Afghanistan desire and deserve. The two sides are required to free 6,000 prisoners under the Doha peace agreement. Indian forces have martyred another 2 youths in Kulgam district of the occupied Kashmir. Police said the Kashmiris were killed during a coordinated search operation in Hanjipura area. The security forces cornered the Kashmiri before opening fire on them. Police said the operation is underway in the village. Meanwhile, Indian authorities suspended all mobile internet services in Kulgam and Shopian districts. Indian atrocities in the occupied valley have increased despite COVID-19 pandemic. The occupied valley has been reeling under India's curfew and communications blackout since August 5th. Now, Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has risen by 34 to 1,167. The Health Ministry reported over 1,700 cases in the last 24 hours, increasing the tally to 56,349. The ministry said the number of recoveries has surpassed 17,000. It said more than 10,000 tests were conducted in the past day, bringing the total to over 483,000. With over 22,000 cases, the southern province of Sindh leads in the number. The death toll from COVID-19 in the United States has risen by 638 to nearly 98,000, while the U.S. suspended travel from Brazil, the second hotspot of the virus, where the death toll has exceeded 22,000. The global COVID-19 death toll has crossed 345,000 with over 5.4 million infections.
As COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc on world economies, sending them into recession, many countries are gearing to lift lockdown restrictions. While virus cases continue to surge in Brazil, thousands of protesters took to the streets defying the lockdown, calling for resumption of economic activities. Over in Europe, Spain's major cities of Madrid and Barcelona will enter phase 1 of the de-escalation program today, while the UK also seeks to loosen its lockdown measures.
2 weeks ago, I set out the government's roadmap to begin easing the measures we put in place to control the spread of coronavirus. I said that we would do so in a safe and controlled way, based on our assessment of progress against the 5 tests we set for adjusting the lockdown.
Japan is also poised to lift its nationwide state of emergency after new cases slowed to a crawl. In China, Wuhan Institute of Virology has rejected the claims that the virus originated in its lab.
This is pure fabrication. Our institute first received the clinical sample of the unknown pneumonia on December 30th last year. After we checked the pathogen within the sample, we found it contained a new coronavirus, which is now called SARS coronavirus 2. We did not have any knowledge before that, nor had we ever encountered, researched, or kept the virus. In fact, like everyone else, we did not even know the virus existed. How could it have leaked from our lab when we never had it?
Meanwhile, South Africa has announced it will ease countrywide lockdown, but warned that COVID-19 outbreak is going to get much worse.
In other news, Turkey says no one will be allowed to take Palestinian lands, deeming Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque as a red line for Muslims worldwide. In a video message, President Tayyip Erdogan said Israel's annexation project disregards Palestine's sovereignty and international law. Erdogan said the global order has long failed to produce justice, peace, and serenity for the Palestinians. Israel has vowed to annex parts of the West Bank and Jordan Valley starting from July 1st. Tel Aviv's seizure plans have been supported by the U.S. in its so-called Middle East peace plan. Russian fighters in Libya were flown out to a town south of Tripoli by their allies, the Eastern Army, after retreating from the front lines. Bani Walid's Mayor Saleh Malayan said the Wagner group retreated with their heavy equipment from the capital to the town's airport. He said the Russians were flown in 3 military planes to Jufra and their military vehicles were driven there. Russian private military contractors have clandestinely fought in support of Russian forces in Syria and Ukraine. Haftar's forces, backed by Russia, Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, have been trying to capture the capital for 13 months, but have suffered a series of defeats in recent weeks in fighting against Turkey-backed forces of the Tripoli government. China has warned the U.S. of countermeasures if it insists on undermining its interests regarding Hong Kong. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says the U.S. is trying to harm China's national security. Earlier, the U.S. threatened China with sanctions over the proposed legislation, saying the bill will end the Chinese-ruled city's self-rule. Zhao says the proposed security bill for Hong Kong will not affect the territory's autonomy. Beijing spokesperson said Beijing has lodged stern representations with Washington over the threats of U.S. sanctions.
I want to stress that Hong Kong is China's Hong Kong. Hong Kong affair is purely China's domestic affair. It is within Chinese sovereign rights to determine when, how, and what legislation to put on Hong Kong. U.S. doesn't have the authority to point fingers or interfere. If the U.S. is determined to harm China's interest, China will take any necessary countermeasures to fight back.
U.S. National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien says China's proposed national security legislation for Hong Kong could lead to U.S. sanctions. In an interview, O'Brien said the proposed law threatens Hong Kong's status as a financial hub. He said if Hong Kong's free enterprise system went away, the financial community will not be able to stay there. U.S. government officials say the legislation would end the Chinese-ruled city's autonomy. The proposed law has triggered violent protests in Hong Kong, with police arresting dozens of demonstrators. Beijing's law seeks to ban treason, sedition and subversion in the territory. Taiwan says it will provide Hong Kong's people with necessary assistance as they protest against China's plan to impose new national security laws. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen said the legislation is a serious threat to Hong Kong's freedoms and judicial independence. In a social media post, Tsai said Taiwan will even more proactively perfect and forge ahead with relevant support work. She said in the face of the changing situation, the international community has stretched out a helping hand to Hong Kong's people. Earlier, the U.S. threatened China with sanctions over the proposed legislation, saying the bill will end the city's autonomy. The proposed law that seeks to ban treason, sedition and subversion in the territory has triggered violent protests in Hong Kong. The UK says it is looking carefully at any impact the new US sanctions on Huawei might have on British networks. A government spokesman said the National Cybersecurity Centre is observing what it could mean for the UK. The spokesman said the security and resilience of UK's networks is of paramount importance. Earlier, media reports suggested Prime Minister Boris Johnson is planning to reduce Huawei's involvement in Britain's 5G network. The US has raised security concerns about Huawei. Now, the US has renewed calls for North Korea to give up its nuclear program. US National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien said Pyongyang will have to forsake the program if it wants to rebuild its economy. O'Brien said Washington has managed to avoid a conflict with Pyongyang over the past 3.5 years. He said the US was keeping an eye on developments in North Korea's closed society. Earlier, North Korea's Kim Jong-un held a key party meeting to discuss new policies to bolster nuclear deterrence. The new developments come amid an impasse in nuclear talks between Washington and Pyongyang. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has thanked Iran for the fuel shipments delivered on Sunday. Maduro said the first of 5 tankers brought gasoline and inputs to Venezuela's refineries to produce gasoline. Maduro said Caracas and Tehran want peace and reserve the right to trade freely. He referred to the two countries as revolutionary peoples who will never kneel down before the US. Venezuela's embattled leader hailed Iran's President Hassan Rouhani and Iranian people for their courage and solidarity. Earlier, Washington said it was considering its options in response to the shipments without providing any specifics. Venezuela's refining network has been operating at about 10% of its 1.3 million barrel per day capacity, forcing it to rely on imports amid US sanctions. The US is likely to impose travel restrictions on Brazil after the country became the world's second biggest hotspot for coronavirus cases. In an interview, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien said because of the situation in Brazil, US is going to take necessary steps to protect Americans. According to Brazil's health ministry, the country has over 347,000 people infected by the virus. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump said he is considering imposing a ban on travel from Brazil. Trump has already suspended entry of most travelers from China and Europe. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has defended his chief aide, Dominic Cummings, for flouting lockdown 6 weeks ago. This comes after the government came under fire from opposition parties, including some Tory MPs demanding Cummings' resignation. Johnson said Cummings followed the instincts of every father. He said Cummings made the journey to ensure his son could be properly cared for by relatives if he too fell ill.
I think he followed the instincts of every father and every parent, and I do not mark him down for that. And though there have been many other allegations about what happened when he was in self-isolation and thereafter, some of them palpably false, I believe that in every respect he has acted responsibly and legally and with integrity, and with the overwhelming aim of stopping the spread of the virus and saving lives. And I stress this fundamental aim because it's thanks to this country's collective resolve in achieving that aim that we continue to make progress.
We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. India has recorded nearly 7,000 new coronavirus cases in a day, bringing the total number of infections to over 138,000. This is the highest single-day figure since the start of the outbreak. The health ministry said 147 people died in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to over 4,000. According to data by Johns Hopkins University, India's virus outbreak is the largest in Asia. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, the virus has claimed 28 more lives, taking the death count to 480. The health ministry said 1,500 more people tested positive for the virus, pushing the total to past 33,000. In Honduras, 6 inmates have been killed while 2 were injured in a violent brawl at the National Women's Penitentiary for Social Adaptation. Prison officials said the fight broke out in the prison located 20 kilometers north of the capital city of Tegucigalpa. The National Penitentiary Institute said a group of inmates set fire to an area where 2 newly incarcerated women were being held. Another group of prisoners broke out of 2 other cells amid the confusion and killed 6 other women in the gymnasium area. Prison officials said police and prosecutors were investigating the attack that was brought under control in the early hours of Sunday.
They were in the prison gymnasium area. The inmates of Module 5 and 6 went there. They opened the gate, got in, and these murders happened. The National Police and Prison Security restored order and calm to save the lives of the rest of the inmates.
Cyclone MANGGA has hit Western Australia as nearly 50,000 homes were left without power. The Bureau of Meteorology says wind speeds of up to 132 kilometers per hour were registered at Cape Leeuwin, becoming the strongest May gusts in 15 years. It said many locations along the west coast have recorded their highest tides of the year. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services says they have received over 500 calls for assistance since Sunday. Authorities have warned residents to prepare for a once-in-a-decade storm. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison advised people to listen to the emergency services to stay safe. Lebanese under quarantine and short of cash have turned their homes into green lots. They have been growing everything from tomatoes to avocado and lemon. Details in this report.
Lebanon descended into an economic crisis late last year as capital inflows dried up and protest erupted against the ruling elite over decades of bad governance and corruption. The crisis has fueled unrest as inflation, unemployment and poverty soar. The situation worsened with the coronavirus lockdown measures. Now people are turning to their gardens to grow food and say the habit has offered a glimpse of hope in bleak times.
We had planted vegetables, fruits, and everything aromatic, but this year we saw the economical situation in Lebanon is not good, and in addition to that, we wanted a green space to sit in. So we decided to expand our plantation. We removed some plants we had planted and replaced them with vegetables.
A local gardening shop owner observed that his supply needs are changing. More and more people came to ask about growing fruits and vegetables instead of aromatic plants.
Now I noticed that all the customers are demanding to plant tomatoes, cucumbers, parsley, mint, and everything related to vegetables. Now 90% of sales is vegetables. I hope it will work out with them so next year it will increase even more so that everyone goes back to planting at home, because agriculture is the origin of everything.
Beirut is a city with few green spaces, but the new trend is reshaping the city. Several initiatives have encouraged people to plant at home using their balconies, front yards, and even rooftops.
Now with the rooftop project, it will definitely save us a lot of money, especially with the high prices of the vegetables in the market. Before, with our garden on the ground, we could be self-sufficient for the season. Now maybe we can store some vegetables that can be stored in order to sustain more than the season.
Lebanon's currency value has decreased by more than a half. So far, the country has registered 1,114 coronavirus cases with 26 deaths.
European stock markets are trading higher as countries move forward with plans to reopen their economies and lift coronavirus restrictions. Frankfurt's DAX index is trading nearly 1.5% higher. CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 1% higher. London's FTSE 100 remains closed for Memorial Day and Spring Bank holiday. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the gains, closing over 1.5% higher. Seoul's Kospi gained 1%. While Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng closed marginally higher. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained a fraction. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in has called for a wartime-like aggressive fiscal policy to cope with the economic crisis from COVID-19. In a meeting, Moon said the bottom of the global economy is invisible. Moon said this is indeed an economic wartime situation. He said South Korea still has room for expansionary fiscal policy in comparison with other OECD member states. Moon said country's national debt ratio is at the level of 41%, but he said the average debt to GDP ratio of OECD members is reaching 110%. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.